The holographic display in Dr. Sarah Chen's laboratory cast an ethereal blue glow across her face as she stared at the results for the 15th time. Her hands trembled slightly as she reached for her comm unit. This couldn't wait until morning. Admiral Hayes, I apologize for the late hour, but you need to see this immediately. She spoke into the device, her voice barely containing her excitement. 20 minutes later, Admiral James Hayes stood in her lab, his usually pristine uniform slightly wrinkled from having been hastily donned. The older man's steel-gray eyes studied the simulation playing out before him with growing astonishment. "Dr. Chen, are you absolutely certain about these readings?" he asked, his military bearing momentarily forgotten as he leaned closer to the hologram. "I've run the simulation 200 times, sir. The math is solid." Sarah pulled up another set of data streams. "We've been looking at FTL all wrong. Everyone in the galaxy treats it like a highway, a means to get from point A to point B. But look here." She highlighted a particular section of the simulation where the fabric of space-time twisted in ways that defied conventional understanding. FTL doesn't just move things through space-time. It creates microscopic tears in reality itself. Tears that heal almost instantly. But she paused for dramatic effect. What if we could control those tears? The Admiral's eyes widened as the implications hit him. "You're suggesting we could weaponize the very act of FTL travel itself?" "Better." Sarah's fingers danced across the holographic interface. "We can use it for defense. Look at this." The simulation showed a small vessel executing what appeared to be a standard FTL jump. But instead of moving through space, it created a cascade of micro-tears in a precise pattern. These tears act like a net. Any incoming matter or energy gets caught in the distortions, and she gestured as the simulation showed incoming projectiles being twisted into impossible shapes before vanishing completely. "It's like creating temporary black holes," Hayes asked, his military mind already racing with possibilities. "Not exactly. Black holes are crude by comparison. This is more like creating temporary bubbles where the laws of physics take a coffee break." She pulled up another simulation. "And that's just the defensive applications. Offensively, a hologram showed a series of coordinated FTL jumps creating a pattern that literally folded space around an enemy vessel. How did no one else discover this?" Hayes wondered aloud. Sarah smiled. "Because everyone else treats FTL like a tool. Humans, we treat it like a toy to be taken apart and put back together in new ways. Every other species in the galaxy developed FTL travel through careful, methodical research. We got it by accident when Dr. Rodriguez was trying to make a more efficient coffee maker and accidentally created a localized space-time distortion." The Admiral couldn't help but laugh. It was true. Humanity's greatest discoveries often came from their tendency to poke at things they probably shouldn't. "How soon can you have a working prototype?" Hayes asked, already thinking about the implications for Earth's defense. "That's the beauty of it, sir. We don't need to build anything new. Every FTL-capable ship we have can do this right now. It's just a matter of reprogramming the drive sequences. Give me 2 weeks to write the software patches." Hayes nodded slowly, his expression turning serious. "Keep this absolutely quiet, Doctor. If word gets out before we're ready." He didn't need to finish the sentence. Earth had made plenty of enemies since joining the galactic community, mainly because humans had an annoying habit of solving impossible problems in ways that made the older species uncomfortable. "Understood, sir. Though I suspect we won't be able to keep it secret for long once we start using it. The physics are distinctive. Let them see it," Hayes replied with a grim smile. "By then, it'll be too late for them to do anything about it. Sometimes the best defense is making your enemies realize they never really understood what they were dealing with in the first place." As the Admiral left her lab, Sarah turned back to her simulations. She had 2 weeks to turn theoretical physics into practical applications, and knowing humanity's luck, they'd need it sooner rather than later. But that was what humans did best, turning scientific accidents into advantages that changed the rules of the game. Out in space, Earth's enemies were about to learn a harsh lesson. Never underestimate a species that treated fundamental forces of the universe like building blocks in a cosmic toy box. The Joint Chiefs sat in stunned silence as the last simulation faded from a holographic display. Admiral Hayes stood at attention, hands clasped behind his back, while Dr. Chen fidgeted nervously with her tablet. General Martinez was the first to speak. "You're telling me we can turn our ship's FTL drives into weapons? Just like that?" "Not weapons exactly," Sarah corrected. "Think of it more like reality manipulation. The drive creates controlled instabilities in spacetime that we can shape and direct. The practical applications are immediate," Hayes added. "We've already successfully tested it on the destroyer U.S. Hawking. The results exceeded our expectations." The footage began playing, showing the Hawking executing what looked like a standard FTL jump. But instead of disappearing into faster-than-light travel, the ship created a rippling distortion in space around it. Incoming kinetic rounds from the test drone simply ceased to exist. "Where did the projectiles go?" asked Admiral Wong, leaning forward. Sarah's eyes lit up with scientific enthusiasm. "That's the fascinating part. They didn't go anywhere. They went everywhere. The FTL field scattered their constituent particles across multiple dimensional planes, completely harmless. And the offensive capabilities?" General Martinez pressed. Hayes nodded to Sarah, who pulled up another recording. This time, the Hawking executed a series of precise, microsecond FTL jumps around a decommissioned frigate serving as the target. Space itself seemed to fold around the target ship, creating a bubble of distorted reality. "We call it a reality lock," Sarah explained. "The target vessel becomes trapped in a pocket where space-time doesn't behave normally. Their weapons can't fire, their engines can't engage, and even their crew experiences time differently. We can hold them there indefinitely, without destroying the ship," Hayes added pointedly, "or harming the crew. It's the perfect containment system." The room erupted in excited discussion, but Admiral Wong raised her hand for silence. "What are the limitations? Power requirements? Range?" "That's the beautiful part," Sarah replied. "It actually uses less power than a standard FTL jump because we're not trying to move the whole ship through spacetime. We're just creating controlled tiers in reality. Range is limited to about 1 light-minute currently, but we're working on extending that. And countermeasures." General Martinez's tactical mind was already at work. "Nearly impossible without understanding the underlying principles," Sarah said confidently. "And even then, it would take years to develop effective counters. We've essentially discovered a new branch of physics that no one else has even theorized about." Admiral Wong stood up, her decision made. "Initialize Project Mobius immediately. I want every ship in the fleet retrofitted with the new drive protocols within 3 months. Dr. Chen, you'll have whatever resources you need." "There's one more thing," Hayes interjected. "The Arcturus Confederation has been making aggressive moves along our border worlds. They've always dismissed us as technological infants playing with borrowed toys. I suggest we let them maintain that belief. For now." A predatory smile crossed General Martinez's face. "Let them think they have the advantage. The look on their faces when they realize what they're actually dealing with will be priceless." "Speaking of which," Sarah added, pulling up one final simulation, "we've theorized that with multiple ships working in concert, we could create large-scale space-time distortions, essentially turning entire regions of space into no-go zones, perfect for defensive perimeters." The implications weren't lost on anyone in the room. Humanity had just changed from being a minor player in galactic politics to holding a trump card no one else knew existed. "Dr. Chen," Admiral Wong said formally, "I believe you've just given humanity its greatest defensive advantage since the development of nuclear deterrence. The question is, how long can we keep this secret? That depends entirely on how badly someone forces our hand." Hayes replied grimly. "But when we do reveal it, we need to make sure the demonstration is memorable." As the meeting concluded, Sarah couldn't help but feel a mix of pride and anxiety. She had handed humanity a tool that could reshape the galaxy, literally and figuratively. Now it was up to the military to use it wisely. Outside the Pentagon, life continued as normal. Citizens went about their daily routines, unaware that in a secure conference room, humanity had just taken its first steps toward becoming a major galactic power. Not through conquest or intimidation, but through their unique ability to look at the fundamental forces of the universe and ask, yes, but what else can it do? The Arcturus Confederation was about to learn a valuable lesson about underestimating humans. Sometimes the most dangerous species wasn't the one with the biggest guns, but the one that could turn your own technology against you in ways you never imagined possible. The Arcturus Confederation battlecruiser Eternal Glory dropped out of FTL at the edge of the Sol System's Kuiper Belt, leading a fleet of 30 warships. Admiral Kextel stood on his command deck, his 4 eyes narrowed in satisfaction as he reviewed the tactical display. Primitive humans, he chittered to his executive officer, still relying on borrowed technology they barely understand. This will be a swift victory for the Confederation. The humans had been a thorn in the Confederation's side since they emerged onto the galactic stage. Their rapid adaptation of alien technologies and unconventional thinking had allowed them to claim several resource-rich systems that rightfully belonged to more advanced civilizations. Today, that would end. "Sir," his sensor officer called out, "we're detecting only minimal defensive forces. Their home fleet appears to be scattered across their colony worlds." Kextel's mandibles clicked in amusement. As expected, their strategic thinking is as primitive as their technology. Begin the advance. The Confederation fleet moved forward in perfect formation, their weapons charged and shields at maximum. According to their intelligence, Earth's defensive capabilities were limited to conventional mass drivers and nuclear weapons, nothing that could threaten their advanced shields. Halfway to Earth orbit, they encountered the first sign that something was wrong. "Admiral," the sensor officer's voice carried a note of confusion. "I'm detecting unusual FTL signatures ahead, but they're not moving. They're just sitting there." "Impossible," Kextel snapped. "FTL fields cannot be sustained in static positions. Check your equipment." Before the officer could respond, space itself seemed to ripple around the lead ships of the formation. 3 Confederation cruisers suddenly found themselves wrapped in a strange distortion, their engines flaring uselessly against the twisted reality surrounding them. "Status report," Kextel demanded. "Sir, we've lost contact with the forward element. Their communications are chronologically out of sync. We're receiving their transmissions from both the future and the past simultaneously." That's when the human ships appeared, not in a conventional battle formation, but in a complex 3-dimensional pattern that seemed to make no tactical sense, until they all activated their FTL drives simultaneously. Space folded. There was no other way to describe it. The fabric of reality itself became a weapon, creating pockets of distorted space-time that caught Confederation ships like insects in amber. "Impossible," Kextel screamed as he watched his mighty fleet being systematically neutralized without a single shot being fired. "They can't have this level of technology. They're barely out of their gravity well." His communications officer suddenly straightened. "Sir, we're being hailed. It's Admiral Hayes of the Earth Defense Force." The human's image appeared on the main screen, looking irritatingly calm. "Admiral Kextel, I presume. I apologize for the unconventional greeting, but we needed to demonstrate something important." "What have you done to my ships?" Kextel demanded. "Created some local abnormalities in space-time," Hayes replied casually. "Don't worry, your crews are perfectly safe. They're just experiencing time a bit differently at the moment. We can reverse it whenever we choose." "This is impossible. You're using borrowed FTL technology. You can't possibly understand it well enough to." "That's humanity's problem. Admiral, Hayes interrupted. We don't just use technology. We play with it. We take it apart. We ask questions no one else thought to ask. Like, what happens if you create controlled tiers in spacetime, and then shape them with precise mathematical formulas? Kextel's secondary hearts were racing as the implications hit him. The humans hadn't just adapted FTL technology. They'd fundamentally reimagined its possible applications. Now, Hayes continued, we could demonstrate some of the offensive capabilities of our new system, but I don't think that will be necessary. Instead, I'm going to release your ships one by one. When I do, you're going to turn around and head back to Confederation space. Then you're going to explain to your superiors exactly what happened here today. And if we refuse? Hayes smiled. It wasn't a pleasant expression. Then we'll be forced to demonstrate why you don't want us to get creative with space-time manipulation around your homeworld. We're quite good at getting creative when we need to be. One by one, the reality distortions faded, freeing the Confederation ships. Their crews were disoriented, having experienced anywhere from a few seconds to several weeks of subjective time within the distortion fields. As the eternal glory retreated from Sol space, Kextel couldn't shake the feeling that the galaxy had just fundamentally changed. The humans hadn't just defended themselves. They'd revealed themselves to be far more dangerous than anyone had imagined. They hadn't just mastered the technology they'd borrowed. They'd looked at it and asked, what else can this do? And in doing so, they'd changed the rules of warfare itself. The Confederation would need to completely reassess their position on humanity. These weren't primitive upstarts playing with borrowed toys. These were beings who could look at the fundamental forces of the universe and see possibilities that no one else had imagined. And that made them terrifying. The Grand Council chamber of the Galactic Concordat hadn't seen this much activity in centuries. Representatives from over 200 spacefaring civilizations gathered in emergency session, their voices creating a cacophony of different languages as they debated the recent events in the Sol system. Ambassador Ji Chen of Earth sat quietly in humanity's modest podium, watching the chaos unfold. Next to her, Dr. Sarah Chen, no relation, fidgeted with her presentation materials, preparing for what would likely be the most important scientific briefing in human history. Order. The ancient Xinthar mediator's harmonics cut through the noise. We will have order in these proceedings. As the chamber quieted, the Arcturus Confederation's delegation took the floor. High Commander Vertal's hologram towered over the central platform, all four of his arms gesturing in agitation. The humans have weaponized faster than light travel itself, he declared. This is an unprecedented threat to galactic stability. We demand immediate sanctions and technological restrictions. Ji Chen activated her podium's anti-grav lifts, raising it to speaking height. Interesting that the Confederation speaks of galactic stability after sending an invasion fleet to Earth. A routine patrol exercise, Vertal began. Of 30 heavily armed warships. Ji's voice carried just the right note of skepticism. Let's be honest about what happened. You thought we were an easy target. You discovered otherwise. The mediator's crystalline structure pulsed with regulatory frequencies. Earth's representative has the floor. We would hear their explanation of these incidents. She nodded to Sarah, who stepped forward. The holographic display in the chamber's center came to life, showing the now famous footage of the Sol system defense. What you're seeing isn't a weapon, Sarah began. It's simply a more complete understanding of what FTL technology is capable of. We didn't modify the drives. We just asked different questions about their fundamental nature. She brought up a simplified diagram of space-time distortions. Every species here developed FTL travel as a means of transportation. You all followed the same logical progression. First the theory, then careful experimentation, and finally practical application. Humanity. We stumbled into it backwards. This caused a murmur among the delegates. Earth's accidental discovery of FTL principles through a malfunctioning coffee maker was something of a galactic joke. Because we didn't know what was impossible, Sarah continued, "We didn't limit ourselves to conventional applications. We looked at the micro-tiers in spacetime that FTL creates and asked, what if we could control these?" The display showed the mathematical models behind their breakthrough. Several scientific delegates leaned forward, their various sensory organs fixed on the equations. The result isn't a weapon. It's a new way of understanding how reality itself can be locally modified. Yes, it can be used defensively, as the Confederation discovered, but its primary applications are in research, exploration, and protection. She brought up new simulations showing how the technology could be used to contain stellar phenomena, create safe corridors through dangerous space, and even assist in planetary climate control. "We're not here to threaten anyone," she took over. "We're here to share. Earth is prepared to offer this technology to all spacefaring civilizations, along with our research into its peaceful applications." The chamber erupted again, but this time in a mixture of disbelief and excitement. The mediator had to pulse several times to restore order. "You would simply give away such an advantage." The mediator's harmonics carried clear confusion. "With appropriate safeguards, yes," Jai replied. "Humanity believes that understanding the universe is more important than controlling it. We also believe that the best way to ensure this technology isn't misused is to make sure everyone understands it fully. And if some choose to use it for military purposes," Vertal demanded, "then they'll be facing opponents who have the same capabilities," Sarah answered. "Mutually assured reality distortion, if you will. Besides, we've only scratched the surface of what's possible. The real advances will come when we all work together to explore these principles." As the debate continued, several scientific delegations were already approaching the Earth podium, eager to begin collaborative research. The military powers, including the Confederation, found themselves forced to reconsider their positions. How do you maintain military superiority when your potential adversaries are offering to share their advantages? In the end, that was humanity's true victory. They hadn't just changed how the galaxy understood FTL travel. They'd changed how the galaxy thought about technological advancement itself. And somewhere in the chamber, a young Arcturus scientist was already wondering what other technologies might be capable of if you just asked the right questions. The game hadn't just changed. The rules themselves were being rewritten. 5 years after the Sol system incident, the Galactic Research Institute didn't just look different, it felt different. Where once stood rigid rows of segregated research stations, now curved arrays of interconnected laboratories, sprawled in seemingly chaotic patterns that somehow made perfect sense. Dr. Sarah Chen stood at the central observation deck, watching scientists from dozens of species working together in ways that would have been unthinkable half a decade ago. Below her, a team of Arcturus physicists collaborated with human engineers, their many-armed gestures animated as they discussed new applications for controlled space-time distortion. Quite a change from the old days, isn't it? Admiral Hayes, now retired and serving as Earth's scientific liaison, joined her at the window. "Sometimes I wonder if this was our real breakthrough," Sarah replied, gesturing at the diverse groups below. "Not the FTL manipulation itself, but getting everyone to start asking what if instead of what is." The evidence was everywhere. The Xinthar, once rigid traditionalists in their scientific approach, had recently published a paper on using micro-scale reality distortions for quantum computing. The Confederation, after initial resistance, had become leaders in applying the technology to environmental restoration on damaged worlds. Latest report from the Exploration Division. Hayes handed her a datapad. "They've successfully mapped the interior of a black hole using coordinated FTL probes. Apparently, everything we thought we knew about singularities was wrong." Sarah smiled. "Everything we thought we knew about everything was wrong. That's the point." A commotion from one of the lower labs caught their attention. A joint human-alien team had just successfully demonstrated something new. They were using precisely controlled FTL fields to manipulate the flow of time itself around small objects. The implications for medical science alone were staggering. "You know what the mediator told me last week?" Hayes asked. "They said humanity's greatest contribution wasn't teaching the galaxy new technology. It was teaching them new ways to think about old technology." Speaking of new ways of thinking, Sarah pulled up another file on the datapad. "Have you seen the latest from the Cultural Exchange Program?" The program had been her idea, embedding scientists from different species with human families for months at a time. Not to study humanity's technical knowledge, but to understand how they approached problems. The results had been fascinating. "The Arcturus education system is being completely restructured," she continued. "They're introducing what they call human pattern thinking exercises, teaching their children to ask impossible questions and pursue ridiculous ideas. Because sometimes the ridiculous ideas turn out to be revolutionary." Hayes nodded. "Like using FTL drives to fold space instead of just traveling through it." Above them, through the transparent ceiling, ships of various designs moved in complex patterns, their FTL fields visible as subtle distortions in spacetime. They weren't just traveling anymore. They were dancing with reality itself, each movement carefully choreographed to maintain the delicate balance of local spacetime. "We're getting reports from the frontier colonies," Sarah noted. "They're using synchronized FTL fields to create stable wormholes now. Actual, controlled wormholes. The Xinthar said it was impossible last year. Now they're leading the research team. Because they finally stopped asking, 'Is this possible?' and started asking, 'How can we make this possible?'" Hayes chuckled. "Very human of them." A group of young aliens, students in the new exchange program, passed by, arguing energetically about whether you could use FTL fields to create pocket universes. A year ago, such a discussion would have been dismissed as absurd. Now, it was just another Tuesday at the Institute. "You know what the really interesting thing is?" Sarah mused. "We're still discovering new applications for conventional FTL drives. Every species is finding their own unique way to apply the principles. The Confederation's reality-anchored farming techniques are revolutionary, even if they're nothing like our original military applications." Hayes nodded toward a memorial plaque on the wall, a piece of twisted metal from one of the Confederation ships caught in that first demonstration. Below it was inscribed, "Where one sees a barrier, another sees a door. The question is not what technology can do, but what we can imagine doing with it." "We could have kept it as a weapon," Sarah said quietly, "changed the balance of power forever. Instead, we changed the way the galaxy thinks," Hayes replied. "Much more effective in the long run." Outside, a new ship design was being tested. A joint project combining technology and insights from a dozen different species. Its FTL field wasn't just for travel or defense. It was a tool for understanding and reshaping the universe itself. The galaxy had learned that the most dangerous thing about humans wasn't their technology or their military might. It was their inability to accept that anything was truly impossible. And in teaching others to think the same way, they had created something far more powerful than any weapon. A future where the impossible was just another problem waiting for someone to ask the right question. As the sun set on another day at the Institute, thousands of scientists of all species continued their work, each asking those impossible questions, each seeking new ways to reshape reality itself. And somewhere, in some modest laboratory, someone was probably looking at some everyday piece of technology and wondering, yes, but what else can it do? After all, that's how this whole thing started, with a coffee maker and a question that no one else thought to ask.